Unfortunately, a lot of business owners and people coming into franchising don't understand how to read the basic fundamentals of a profit and loss statement, what the real numbers are of any business. Hey everyone, welcome to Courtside Conversations. My name's Emile, founder and owner of Little Boomers Basketball, and it's a pleasure to be your host today. Wherever you're watching today's episode, I hope you're having a booming day, and yes, the pun is intended. My journey to entrepreneurship started on May 1st, 2018 when I launched my first basketball program with 9 kids enrolled. Today, thousands of kids across Australia are thriving in our programs, all thanks to the commitment and passion of our incredible franchisees. This podcast is here to give you real, straightforward, no BS insights into business, entrepreneurship, and what it's like to own a franchise. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode. The number one question that I get before somebody becomes a franchise, when they're calling me, they're interested in franchising, is, Emile, what's the profit? What's the return on investment? Now, if I then said to you, okay, are you referring to the gross profit margins, the net profit margins? Are you referring to the revenue? Because what if I said you can get 200 grand in your first year, but you're only left with 5 grand profit? Unfortunately, a lot of business owners and people coming into franchising don't understand how to read the basic fundamentals of a profit and loss statement, what the real numbers are of any business. In this video, I'm going to be taking you through a short tutorial that is going to break down 4 key components that you need to know: your revenue, your cost of goods sold, your expenses, and your net profit margins. If this all sounds foreign to you, you're in the right place. Let's get into today's video. You know, I've got a funny story. Once when I first started my business, I was doing a school holiday camp and it was for 6 hours. And I think I had about 35 kids. It was a really successful day. And I'm going with my mum after. We go out for lunch and I'm celebrating. I'm counting how many enrollments I've made, 35 kids, and I'm timesing that by my revenue. Wow, I've made $2,000 in a single day. And then I say to myself, well, what about your court hire fees and your coaches' fees and stuff? You know, my mum was saying to me. So I got out a paper. I said, okay, this is how much revenue I've made. Then I minus court hire fees for the 6 hours. And then I minus coach wages and a couple other expenses. And I figured out what my bottom line figure was, like how much money I had left after everything was paid. And it was only like a couple $100. And then I got deflated all of a sudden because I was all excited about the 30 kids and how much money I made. Then when reality checked in and I counted all the expenses, I was left with barely anything. And that was a really big eye opener for me that I really need to understand my numbers more as a franchise operator. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the 4 key components of a profit and loss statement, which you will probably see before you come into a franchise. Those components are revenue, cost of goods sold, operating expenses, and net profit margins. Stick around to the end of the video because I've created a really cool tool that I'm going to give you access to. Okay, guys, what I've done here is I've broken down a quadrant into 4 key elements that you need to understand when you're learning about a profit and loss statement. The first one is revenue and sales. Second is cost of goods sold, aka COGS, and this will give you your gross profit margins. Then you have expenses, and then you finally can have your net profit margin. Now, in this example, I'm going to use my franchise, Little Boomers Basketball, with a real example. I'll put some numbers here, but you can apply the same principles here to any franchise or business that you're looking to invest. Now, the first one is revenue/sales. This is probably the most easiest number to calculate. It's the top line, how much money the business is generating. They call this vanity because it's a bit of an airy-fairy metric. A lot of people like to say, yeah, I turn over 500K, I turn over 100K. But they call it a vanity metric because it really doesn't mean anything until you've minused your COGS and your expenses and you get your real net profit margin. So they do call revenue a vanity metric. And that's probably why, because it doesn't really mean anything, at least after all this. So this is your top line number. So for example, let's say I've got 100, let's say I charge $195 for a membership for Little Boomers Basketball. And I've got 20 kids. Revenue that I'm left over exactly with 195 times 20. I'm just getting my calculator, 3,900. So that is pretty much revenue. Top line, it's the easiest number to calculate. I can see here if I'm charging students $195, I've got 20 kids in the class, I just multiply that and I have $3,900. Quite simple. Let's move into the more other complicated number, which is the cost of goods sold. Okay, team, so we've calculated our revenue sales, the easiest number to calculate. Now we need to calculate the cost of goods sold. This is called COGS. A lot of people get this number confused, unfortunately. They mistaken gross profit for net profit margin, and that's incorrect. How I want you to understand COGS is, I'll give you an example. If I'm running an 8-week basketball program, parents are paying $195, I've got 20 kids in the class. What are the direct expenses that I must purchase to run these class? These are direct expenses. So any direct expenses that's associated with delivering the product or service, direct. And I'll give you an example in our industry of what direct expenses are. So the first one is royalty fee. I need to pay a royalty fee at the moment, which is 10%. This is mandatory. This is included in the $3,900. So that's 10% of $3,900. That's $390. So straight away, that's a COG, royalty fee. The next one is court hire. If I don't have an indoor basketball court, I cannot deliver the service. That is a direct expense. So court hire fees, as an example, let's say I'm paying $80 and it's an 8-week program. 80 times 8 equals, let me get my calculator, 640. What's another direct expense that's needed for me to deliver classes? I need coaches, don't I? Of course you do. So coaches are a COG. Coaches. Now let's say I'm paying each coach $25 an hour. That's $50 for the hour. For an 8-week program, 50 times 8, $400. So what you would do with any business model that you're looking at is you want to see what are the direct COGS associated with delivering the product or service. Now we're going to talk about why this is important. Once you have calculated the COGS, you are going to see how much money you have left over to put into expenses. Now, I want to ask you a question. Is marketing cost of goods sold or is it an expense? Marketing falls under expense. It is not a direct, as good as it is not a direct expense related to delivering a product or service. So it's very important. In this example, if my cost of goods sold is $3,900, which means it's the exact same as revenue, I literally have no money to pay expenses and I've got no net profit margins. And your wage as a business owner is included in expenses, by the way. It's not included under COGS. You shouldn't be involved in delivering a product or service unless you're an employee. So your wage as a business owner falls under the expense category. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add up all of our COGS and we're going to get total COG fee. X, $390 for the royalty, $640 for the court hire fee, $400 for the wages. We got 1430. Is that right? Yeah, 1430. So that is a direct money that I need to pay in order to deliver my 8-week basketball program, $195 for 20 kids. Now, we're not done there. We need to calculate the gross profit margin. This is a percentage, right, of how much money we're using from the top line of revenue to deliver our product or service. So to do that, we do revenue minus COGS divided by revenue equals gross profit percentage. Now, stick with me, guys. I'm going to walk you through this. The revenue, which is $3,900, minus the cost of goods sold, which we calculated to be 1430, is 2,470. Now, we divide that figure by the total amount of revenue, which is $3,900, is 63%. So my gross profit margin is 63%. And in a children's sports industry, that is a healthy gross profit margin. You want to be anywhere between 60 to 65% as gross profit margin to have expenses left over. Again, this varies. If you're looking at a cafe or a different franchise, your gross profit margin will vary. Calculate what the industry standard is. But in children's sports, 60 to 65% gross profit margin is healthy. So this pretty much means 63% I've got left over for expenses, and then finally to see what my net profit margin is. So from that $3,900, remember that top line revenue, that vanity metric, from that money, I've got 63% left over to determine expenses. As you can imagine, we want this figure to be as high as possible. If this is only 40% or 30% or 20%, you're not going to be able to have much in the expense column and therefore not even any net profit left over. Now that we understand COGS, which is currently at 63% in this example, remember, only expenses that is directly related to delivering the service is included here. Let's now move into the expenses category. The other day I was speaking to a lady and she was telling me that she's run some hypothetical profit and loss numbers and she wanted to run them by me. So I said, okay, what do you have? I've calculated, Emile, the court hire fees to be about $200 an hour. And then I said, whoa, hold on. Your numbers are really off. And so I said, where did you get those numbers from? Oh, look, I assumed. Never assume. I've created a franchise profit calculator where you can input real numbers, court hire fees, coaches' wages, how many kids you have in the program, so you can find out what your potential profit is per class. Click the link below to use the calculator. I hope you find it useful. Okay, team, now that we've calculated the gross profit margins, it's time for us to add up all of our expenses. So what is an expense? If COGS is any expense directly related to delivering a product or service, expenses are indirect things related. For example, let's say that I've invested in marketing to get kids into the program, right? Let's say I spent $200 on a Facebook ad. So I've got $200 on marketing. So marketing, 200 bucks. That's an expense. It's not directly related to delivering a product or service. It's an indirect cost. Let's say I'm paying myself a wage as well. Owner wage. Let's go owner wage. Let's say I'm paying myself from that 500 bucks. And then let's say I want to get some new basketballs for the class. Now, the thing with basketballs is, yes, it's a direct expense. You need basketballs, but because you reuse them every single class, they are an indirect expense. For example, if you're running a cafe restaurant and you buy a complete new coffee machine, that's an expense because you're going to be reusing that every single time. So let's say I've got new basketballs, 100 bucks. And ideally, team, you'd put in any indirect expense related to the business. Now, it's very important that as your business grows, you're tracking expenses, because what tends to happen is as a business or franchise grows, there's a term called growing broke, which means as revenue increases, expenses double up. What you want to do in order to run a really good business is you want to try and maintain expenses or keep expenses as fixed as possible. Because if you don't, and every time revenue goes up, you're just going to be growing broke. So that's part of running a lean business, is what it's called. Running a lean business is keeping expenses tight so that revenue grows and expenses only grow little or even stay fixed. So I'm going to add up all my expenses here. 200, 500, 700, 800 bucks. So expenses is 800 bucks. So let's quickly summarize everything. I've calculated my revenue, sales. This is a vanity metric. I've then calculated all my COGS, any expense that's related to delivering the basketball class for kids. And I've added it all up, royalty fee, court hire fees, coaches. Then I've got my total COG fee. And to calculate the percentage, it's revenue minus COGS divided by revenue equals gross profit margin. So from that $3,900, I've got 63% left over. I then calculated my expenses. Now, these are indirect expenses, marketing, my owner's wage, new basketballs. I'm left with $800. The final piece to the puzzle, and this is a sanity metric. If revenue is vanity, net profit margin is sanity. Let's go calculate the net profit margin. So, by far, team, the most important metric in any franchise or business is a net profit margin. Essentially, this number is telling you, after you've paid your COGS, after you've paid your expenses, this is how much money is left over in the bank. And this is before taxes. Obviously, you've got to pay taxes on profit, but it's the best indicator of how profitable a franchise is. It's the net profit margin. How much money is left over after COGS and after expenses, and we're going to calculate it as a percentage. So I'm going to give you the formula, guys, in case you're a math freak. So we're going to go revenue, which is $3,900, minus COGS, which is 1430, minus my operating expenses that I've paid, remember, indirect expenses, which is $800, divided by total revenue equals net profit margin. So I'm going to get my calculator. I've got it out here. $3,900 minus gross profit, cost of goods sold, 1430, minus $800 for expense. I'm left over with 1670, team. So 1670. I divide that by my total revenue, which is 3,900. And here we go. 16 divided by 3,900 is 42%. Net profit margin. NT. Net profit margin. Now, what does this mean in simple terms? I wish somebody told me this earlier. This 42% net profit margin means for every dollar the company makes, you retain 42 cents. I'll say that one more time. For every dollar you generate as a franchisee or business owner, you're left with 42 cents, right? Or 42%. Now, a healthy net profit margin in the children's sports industry is anywhere between 25 to 30% net profit margin. That's where you want to be at. And this is after you're paying yourself a wage, after you're investing marketing. For the children's sports, you want to be at 25 to 30%. That's if you're running a really good operation, you've got strong enrollments, you're smart with your expenses, anywhere between 25 to 30% in the service-based children's sports industry is healthy. Guys, this changes from business to business. For example, hospitality operates at like a 5 to 10% net profit margin. You need to calculate your industry standards to see what the net profit margin is. But ideally, you want to get that to 25 to 30. In this example here, it's 42% net profit margins. But I want to say it one more time. This is a sanity metric. The only thing that matters in business, the only thing is not revenue, it's not COGS, it's net profit margin, because this is how much money is left over in the bank account once you've paid everything. So really, if you're making 100 grand in revenue, but you've got a 5% net profit margin, you've only got 5 grand in the bank account, and that doesn't mean anything, right? So you want to track your net profit margin, but the thing about net profit margin is all of these play a role, meaning if this is high and this is low, your net profit margin is going to be high, really good. However, if this is low and this is high, your net profit margin is going to be very bad or very poor. So these two numbers here, cost of goods sold and expenses, are related or help with the net profit margin. So team, I hope that helped you. I hope that helped you understand the financial numbers. Whenever you're coming into a franchise and you're looking at P&L statements, look at the revenue, look at the cost of goods sold and the gross profit margins, the expenses, and also the net profit margin. And one more other thing I wanted to add, any expenses that the franchise at head office give to you, for example, if head office do a training day and it costs you $200 as a franchisee to be there, that goes under the expense column. If the franchise company is investing in a new technology and it's costing the franchisees $200 a month, that is an expense that you have to burden in your expense column. So don't forget to go to the franchise disclosure document in any franchise agreement and look at all the expenses that can be applicable to your franchise. Take care, guys. God bless.